so sorry about that. Yeah, normally, what's your facility? My email address, I can respond to that, or I give you our, email box, so we should always be. So, you prefer email. Okay, is there anything insurance related that I can help with? What were you on originally? Okay, yeah. Okay. I have you pulled up, is it, your commercial, physical register?
Wow.
Get that many.
2:30 on Friday, October 7th, 2022. And I call to order the Special Finance and Budget Committee. Do we have a roll call, please?
Ford,
Here.
Martin,
Martin present.
Sanchez,
Sanchez present.
Sturgis,
Surges present.
Pepe,
Happy here.
Shepro,
Shepro present.
Hurak, Berman.
Here, public comments. Is there anyone who has signed up for public comments, either online or in present? Hearing none. Mr. Onzik, you're up with the Finance Director's report of the fiscal year 23 general fund budget update.
Good afternoon, everyone. I did provide another update last night. I know everyone hates that, but I just wanted to make sure that you have a presentation that will be as close to what ultimately will become the draft budget as possible. So there was one correction I made to the FICA and IMRF expense calculation, which resulted in an increase of the allocation of property tax revenue to the general fund by $156,000. Or let me jump ahead to that slide so you can see what I'm talking about. Oh, on the side? Okay. Oh, yes. Okay. No problem. Okay. So it increased the allocation of property tax revenue by $156,000, which means it reduced the deficit by that amount. The other thing is that since we were talking about how much would the 3% union wage increase cost the general fund, and that figure was provided to the executive committee at $1,165,000. I decided to go ahead and add it into this presentation since in all likelihood, we will be giving a minimum of 3% union wage increase to union employees, since we're doing that, or presumably doing that for non-union. So I thought we should have both in the budget, or it would make sense to have both. But the difference would be for non-union, the individual increases to the individual department budgets would actually be placed in those budgets. But for union, it'll be held in contingency until the collective bargaining agreements are settled. So that would be the only difference. So I placed the 3% union wage increase into the contingency, and that increased the deficit by 1.1 million. And so the net change between those two adjustments is an increase to the deficit of roughly $1 million. So That's all that changed. Everything else is the same. And so I don't really need to go through everything. This is the statement that explains that the new positions will be held, or the budgets for new positions will be held in contingency. And then this reflects the new deficit at being almost $17.5 million. And then I added a line, below there, I show that each additional percent of non-union increases adds $358,000. Then I added the line for union increases, which each additional percent would add $388,000. So that's a change there. And then because now we added a 3% union increase, I added one more column so that you can see the various components that are making up the budget. So you have the starting point of last year, and then you have the Safety Act expenses, the new positions, you have any other changes, and then you have the 3% non-union increase, the tentative 3% union increase, and then the department equity adjustment. And I increased it to the 900,000 that was presented at the last meeting. So those are the components in broad summary form. And then those were fleshed out in throughout all the individual departments. And you can see now on this slide where on that contingency line, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, about the 5th line down, you can see that that's where so many of those items were moved in contingency. So you've got the Safety Act expenses are in the contingency line. The new positions are in the contingency line. The non-union increase or 3%. I've got that reversed. I see that now. It's supposed to be the 989,000 is supposed to be in the tentative column. You know what I do? I reverse the column headings. I'm sorry. I knew something like this would happen when I'm working so late. So those 2 column headings, the one that says union is really non-union, and the one that says non-union is really union. I apologize for that.
But none of that makes a lot of difference.
No, not to the
Bottom
total.
line.
So I'll correct that so that there's no confusion going forward.
Change the bottom line at all, right?
No, it doesn't.
Change the bottom line.
All right, so I'll just flip through these slides then. Yeah, I don't know that there's anything else here that I need to point out. It's all the same departments. It's just the contingency department would have changed. Okay, and then here's all the Safety Act detail, non-Safety Act new positions. Okay, and then so here's a summary that's impacting the budget. And I guess this is what we really need to make sure that we're finalizing at this point, or changing if you decide to change it. But right now at this point, what we're assuming is in the budget are those total of 37 Safety Act personnel, 29 new non-Safety Act personnel, a 3% non-union wage increase, a tentative 3% wage increase for the expiring union contracts, $900,000 of non-union equity adjustments. There's no property tax increase included in this version, and there's no new sales tax included. So those are all the things that we need to have finalized in order to prepare the actual draft budget. And here again is the total number of reserves we have to work with. This is what a property tax increase would look like. For the general fund group, it's a $2.5 million increase of revenue. And then these were the 2 options that were discussed earlier, but the projected deficit now has been updated to include the union increase, but the other items are the same. So I'm proposing, I did update the property tax freeze protection fund amount to an even 5 million. There's a little bit more than that, but I just wanted to make that simpler. And so the difference obviously is coming out of the COVID payroll reimbursement. So I think I can leave it there. I think that at least highlights what was updated for you.
Deal.
I'm sorry,
Yeah, Shepro, I think this is obvious from your presentation, but my understanding is that what has been presented does not include either any increase in the levy except for the new growth and does not include the sales tax.
That's correct.
Mr. Chairman,
yes, Ms. Page.
when we say we're taking money out of reserves, did that historically mean the property tax freeze protection fund? Because there never was a COVID fund before. So historically, that would be that means reserves, correct?
Yes, I don't recall that we ever touched anything else. We do have what is called a quote unquote special reserve fund, in which we may have deliberately set aside an amount in 1 year to be used in another year. We may have done something like that. But in terms of tapping a general reserve, we've only ever used the property tax freeze.
Okay, so when we say reserves, this is it, property tax freeze, except in this exceptional case of the COVID payroll
That's true.
reimbursement fund.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And leaving aside the COVID payroll reimbursement fund, which will go away very soon, how much is left in the property tax freeze protection fund? After we take out $5 million.
I think there might be about a million, something like that.
One,
Well, actually, you know what? We can move back to a previous slide. It tells you the balance there. So, no, okay, so if you take 5 million out, it's 1.6 million left.
1.6. That'll get you a cup of coffee, right?
Big one. Other comments and questions?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Ms. Page.
So how do we typically renew the reserves?
Well, typically, historically, especially recently, it happens when we're at the point in the year, which is usually in the March timeframe, when we know what all our revenue and expenses were for the fiscal year that just closed. Then whatever that difference is, normally it's every year. So far, it's been an excess revenue over expenditures. Then that's the point in which we draft that resolution and then allocate that. And so typically, it's been a portion of it was going into the property tax freeze protection fund, and like half and half into the property tax freeze protection and half into the capital fund. But anything that in the most recent years, anything that was attributed to the payroll reimbursement from whether it was the CARES Act or the ARPA fund, we've been putting that into the separate COVID payroll reimbursement fund just to segregate that. Not that it has any different purpose, but that you understand what the source was.
Any other questions? Thank you, Joe.
Okay, you're welcome.
Thank you.
All right, item 4, new business. A resolution approving the fiscal year 23 draft budget to be placed on the public display. And that budget is not attached, but we've just witnessed Mr. Hanzik reviewing that with us. So we all have seen what it is and what the final numbers are from it. But then he has shown us 2 options that we could select from. I'm sure that most of us could probably come up with something else, but those 2 seem to be the most legitimate and the most thought through. So our role today is to pass a resolution what that budget should be, and then present to the executive committee immediately following this meeting. Yes, Mr. Leonard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to so move Mr. Anzic's budget presentation forward for approval and vote to move forward to the executive committee.
Can I pause this for one moment? I don't believe that we had this on file to be able to do any actual action now, so we can't vote because it
I'm
wasn't
sorry, it's not going to be a vote. It's going to be a,
consensus is all that we're
Consensus.
looking for.
okay. So I think if you want to state that in some other way?
Yes, I would like a consensus vote to move Mr. Anzic's budget forward to the executive committee for their review to move forward to the county board meeting next Tuesday.
Question for the state's attorney?
She said, okay.
Is the same answer going to be given with executive?
Well, I have
Pause for
I
just
have a some question to ask.
Well,
Are we moving forward one option or the other? Or
Just moving
both?
the budget forward, the option.
Presentation as it was made.
Just the budget.
With,
Just the budget.
but without the revenue that would be generated by a levy increase. Correct?
I thought we had to pick an option today.
The motion picks the option.
Sorry, we can't hear you. Would you use the microphones, please?
I thought we had to pick one option or the other today.
Yes, we do have to pick an option.
So the problem is nothing is attached, so we can't officially move anything. But if by consensus you decide which option to pick, then that's what will then be placed eventually to be voted on, but no official action otherwise today.
And it will.
Question for the state's attorney? Mr. Chairman,
Yes, yes.
does not this board regularly vote to authorize the approval of contracts that are not attached and in many cases do not even exist?
Yes, but in this particular case, we don't have a budget prepared because Mr. Anzic hasn't been given the direction from the board as to which budget to put out there to be reviewed and then ultimately voted on. So at this point, we just need a consensus of how you would like Mr. Anzic to prepare the budget, and he will do that, and then we'll be able to place it on file and vote at the appropriate date.
I guess my question then is, doesn't the same problem then obtain when the executive committee meets in a few minutes?
Right?
Yes, there will be no official action that can happen at the executive committee also.
But it can pass it on to the county board? No,
No, because we don't have anything on file for them to review.
okay. So having the executive committee meeting is essentially a waste of time.
Nothing I will opine about.
Okay,
That was supposed to be a little funny.
yes.
Yes.
Well,
I will not-
As I understand it, Mr. Leonard, what you're asking is for us to agree that the budget as presented by Mr. Ankit be presented to the executive committee.
Yes, although it sounds like what I'm hearing now is even though as a consensus, if we agreed to move it to the executive committee, they don't have any authority to do anything with it. And therefore, the county board meeting on Tuesday, we cannot vote on the budget to be approved. We cannot.
Not.
What action is required in order for any committee to be able to vote? Answer. A physical document?
I'm going to bring up Assistant State's Attorney Aaron Brady regarding this.
Hi, Assistant State's Attorney Aaron Brady. So the county code requires that the finance director present a draft budget to the executive committee and that the executive committee present that draft budget to the county board. The county board then votes to place that draft budget on public display. And then at least 15 days later, or yes, on the other end of things, then the county board can vote to finally approve it. That process cannot begin where there is no draft budget prepared. And so it's my understanding that the committee needs to present some guidance to the finance director because it's not as simple as just preparing separate budgets based on a few variables. There are some decisions that need to be made before an accurate budget can be presented.
In that case, Mr. Chairman, Shepro,
Yes,
I have a
Shepro.
question for Director Onzik. Joe, what is involved in your preparing the document that the state's attorney has referred to?
Well, the document is generated from the accounting system, so all of the information needs to be input. Most of it is already there. It's just these last items need to be, like, for example, the 3% wage increase for non-union employees. All of that has to be put in the individual departments, sub-departments, line items. And then there's all the related things that are, it's the tiny details behind the scenes. The payroll accrual has to be updated. And then in the individual special revenue funds, the FICA and the IMRF, the insurance liability, the workers' comp, the unemployment portions that are all tied to the total payroll expense, all that has to be updated. And then the special revenue funds themselves need to be rebalanced to accommodate the change. And then the changes to the general fund need to be up, the impact of that on the IMRF and the fund and the FICA fund needs to be, input in and changed and updated. And so then all of those changes behind the scene need to be done. Then we can generate a document, but the document is really a dump of unreadable data. I mean, that it's not suitable for presentation. So then it takes a couple of days for staff to format all of that into a document that is then presented to the board. So roughly we've got about, I would say, 4 days worth of work, 3-4 days worth of work at the best. Assuming there isn't no major change. I mean, if you decide to change it to a 4%, something like that, then we have to go back and undo it. We've started trying to put all these changes in anticipation that it's probably going to be a 3% increase since nothing else has been suggested. So we've been working on trying to get all that in already so that we can kind of be ahead of it. But that's the type of thing I need to have clarification on.
Okay, if there are no further changes,
Mhm.
is the action of this committee to forward it all you need in order to put the draft budget together?
Well, needs to be clarification as to whether it's including or not including a property tax increase. That's one of the major items.
I thought that the consensus is to forward the
Okay.
presentation without the property
Okay.
tax
Well,
increase.
that's simple enough. And so what I would do then is balance the budget with, just that much
Right.
drawdown of reserve.
And what would your reasonable estimate, not working until 4:30 in the morning, to have that document in form that it could be presented to the executive committee?
Well, at the latest, I would say the end of next Friday, but it could be sooner. I hate to promise it sooner, but it could very well be sooner. It's just because of all the detail work of putting the presentation together. The document together.
So you need about a week.
Well,
About a
it's-
week.
It's like 4 days, but next week, Monday's a holiday, so.
Yeah,
About a week, okay. All
And
right.
one of the complicating factors, but we're trying to work around it, is our key person, Ms. Wagner, is on vacation until Wednesday, but she'll be back Thursday and Friday, and so she'll be able to do her part, on those remaining days.
next Friday would be a reasonable expectation.
Well, by end of day, I can't promise it by a morning or an afternoon, but certainly by end of day.
That's too soon.
Mr. Martin. Martin.
No, I don't have anything.
All right. Mr. Leonard.
I guess my concern is, I thought as of yesterday, we had agreed not to include potential union wages. And then after the meeting, it must have been decided to add those. And now I'm being told that you need maybe 4 days to get everything in order before we can approve a budget. Why weren't we told that yesterday? Because what is the purpose of this meeting today then?
Well, honestly, I did not know that that was the case. I thought, as you thought, that the purpose of the meeting was to provide direction to me so that I would know what budget to prepare to be placed on public display. I was unaware of the requirement that the physical draft budget needed to be presented to the executive committee first, and then they needed to actually present that to the board. We've really not operated that way in the entire time I've been here. So I was not aware of that. I'm not saying we shouldn't follow that. I personally was not aware of that. And it wasn't until the state's attorney's office was trying to assist with drafting the resolution for that was supposed to be today, when they were doing their due diligence and looking up the statutes, when they saw that it was a requirement for the actual draft budget to be presented to the executive committee, who then presents it to the board. So those are requirements we just became aware of yesterday, late afternoon.
You know, and I understand that, Mr. Onset, and believe me, I'm not trying to cast blame on anyone. I'm just saying that, you know, once again, by us waiting to the 11th hour to do this, these things are becoming apparent to us, where it's going to take another week now. And if we had done this a month or 2 months ago, we would have had adequate time. So I'm very disappointed that there wasn't proper preparation and meetings in order to get this done more quickly. And now at the 11th hour, we can't do it. And I understand the reasons, and I'm not saying that they're not justified, but I think once again, this proves why we can't wait till the last minute.
Well, in support of what's happened, one of the things that has carried this out is that every meeting that we discussed it, there was some question during that meeting that someone didn't have the full data that they wanted to make their decision. So we had to go for a period of time until that data was compiled and presented to them. So that's probably one of the biggest reasons why we delayed it. There were, I think, at least 2 meetings I know of that we did not. Someone wanted more data than was being presented and delayed it.
It was, and if I may.
Madam Chair.
Thank you, sir. I'm sorry for interrupting. When Mr. Onset presented his calendar.
Microphone, please.
When Mr. Onset presented his calendar in June of what the timeline was, we are well within that time frame. So this is not at the last minute. And last year, it was approximately at the same time, October 12th, I believe, and this is the 7th. So we are not at the last minute. The last minute would be presenting this on November 29th, which would truly be authentically the very last minute. That'd be the last day we could take the vote. So there is ample time to have this passed. I think the expediency that is being requested by the board is because of the upcoming election, and you want all the voters to understand how everybody here has taken that vote. So it is not at the last minute. If next year, if you, sir, would like to have this budget passed by September, when we pass, pending your election, when we pass the time frame on how to do this, we can just ensure that this is passed on September 10th or whatever other date this board, the new board, would feel appropriate. But we are in that time frame. We are not delayed. This is truly not at the last minute.
Mr. Martin.
Well, I guess I have to say I'm confused. We can't take action today except to arrive at a consensus. Is that sufficient that we in fact can have a proposed ordinance published for 15 days if we haven't, if this committee hasn't voted on an ordinance? Are we gonna have to have another meeting?
So there will have to be another meeting. Right now, the consensus essentially is for Mr. Onzik to know what direction this board wants him to take in terms of the budget.
Well, then shouldn't that be our discussion today? We go down this list, issues impacting the budget. And doesn't that put the matter to bed? We're either going to say include them in the budget or not. I mean, Joe's been asking us for this for 6 weeks.
That's why I asked if Shepro, that's why I asked if he had everything he needed. Sorry.
So why don't we start at the top and say what we're going to do? I mean, I don't know how else to give him instructions to prepare an ordinance if we need an ordinance in front of us to vote. We've got to give him some marching orders.
Shepro, parliamentary inquiry.
Bates on stack.
Parliamentary inquiry takes precedence, but I yield.
Oh, no, I yield.
No, I just wanted a clarification from the state's attorney then that the consensus is acceptable under the county code for this committee, but it is because the language specifically says it must be presented to the executive committee. So this committee can do everything that Mr. Martin spoke about. I guess is my question, just to make sure that that's,
Yes, that's
Okay.
correct.
thank you. Thank you, Ms. Bates.
Thank you, Mr.
Ms. Bates.
Chairman. For my clarification, which maybe this has been determined already, but I see we're in a catch-22 loop here, that we can't make the decisions without the attached budget, and we can't have an attached budget without the decisions. So are we gonna make some decisions today without the attached budget?
Well, there's.
Yes.
Well, the decisions are helping to make the budget. That's what he needs.
Correct.
Because Mr. Onzik, in all of his wisdom, he's not able to just decide what he wants in the budget. He needs
Needs
your
our-
input. Yes.
Okay.
This, Shepro, just
Yes,
again, this committee can give direction to Mr. Onzik.
Yes.
Dale.
No, we have to give, this committee gives Mr. Onzik direction as to what to present to the executive committee.
Under the standing committees, the Finance Budget Committee, this committee shall have jurisdiction over review of budget proposals as presented by standing committees and recommend a balanced budget to be forwarded to the executive committee. So right now, that is what you're doing by giving instruction to Mr. Onzik as to what the budget should look like so that he can prepare said budget and then we can go forward with the process.
Mr. Leonard?
Yeah, just a couple of things. Number one, if we have to go through some new considerations, which we weren't considering yesterday, such as the projected union wage increase, I would like to know specifically from you, Joe, if you could explain to us what specifically you need us to decide upon, what points, so that we can vote on those points here in the Finance Committee and then move it forward without any other changes or additions to it later on. Because yesterday I thought we had kind of agreed we weren't going to use projected union wages. And then today, here we are. And I'm not blaming you at all. I'm just saying, give us direction on what we have to okay to use so that we can get a budget together to move forward to the executive committee.
I think the reason for Joe to show those is that we wanted, we were looking at what was the total budget going to be. Normally, we don't look at that until those increases have been passed upon, and then we modify the budget at that point in time, and that's after the budget's been passed. Is that not true, Joe?
That is true. Well, okay, you want to know specifically, it's that one slide I think Mr. Martin already referred to, that issues impacting the budget. That's really the list of items just to verify that, and it's what I've been putting on display for you in those various columns. Are we going to have all the Safety Act personnel? Are we going to have all the new personnel included? Is it the 3% non-union wage increase, or is it 4, or is it less? Or is it a tentative 3% wage increase for expiring union contracts? If you don't want to have that in there, it's easy to take it out. It's just a spreadsheet. So if you decide you don't want that, we take it out. That's not a big deal in itself, because it's just a one-line change. The 900,000 of non-union equity adjustments is that amount that was just recently updated from 700 to 900. Is that the amount you'd like to settle on? And the fact that there is no property tax increase yet included and no sales tax included. So those are the main items, and otherwise, I mean, that's already, everything listed here is already included in what you're seeing in terms of the presentation. So you could accept it as is, or tell me what should be removed or changed, and I'd be happy to do that.
Mr. Sanchez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Regarding the inclusion of the union wage increase, do we have any confirmation from either our legal representatives or the Labor Management Committee that 3% is the number that is already being discussed. Because if we're getting ahead of negotiations, I don't think it would be appropriate to include that in this budget.
Mr. Leonard?
Mr. Sanchez, I think you bring up a good point because ultimately, whatever the union wage increases are, we're going to have to amend the budget
Right.
unless they're exactly 3%. And we don't know that. So why even include it now?
Well, I think it was requested by other members, but I'm just raising the point
Yeah. And
that I'm
and the
concerned
point I'm
that it
making
gets in
is
the way of
we know it's
negotiations.
but I think it also hurts in negotiations if we present something saying, well, we don't know if this will be all of it or not. I don't think it's a good posture to take, but it's just my personal opinion. So, once again, putting a 3% union wage increase in there as a potential is saying we've already agreed to at least 3%, but you could get more if you want to, because we can amend the budget, which we do every year. And usually in labor negotiations, we never put anything in until the negotiation is complete for that very reason. So I think this is problematic.
Yeah, Mr. Tepe.
Mr. Chair, could we have Blair bring up the particular page of Mr. Onsick's presentation that we're discussing?
Um,
Page 22 of 29 in the
Issues
document that I was
impacting
given.
Budget.
Yeah.
Go back. please.
Not this, yeah, that's
There
it.
you go.
My understanding of the discussion, Mr. Chair, is that these are the key items that Mr. Onsick needs guidance on as to whether or not we're going to do. Okay? If we go down to the putting money aside for a potential union increase, cat's already out of the bag. If they're going to have an increase that's going to be somewhere in that neighborhood. So putting money aside for that doesn't bother me. But the key thing is we need to make decisions on these items. So let's make decisions on these items and see if we can't move forward.
I thought we did yesterday. I thought we agreed that. we were
But then
gonna add
but
the-
now you're saying you want the 3%
No, just one second.
out,
Let me
out,
finish.
okay?
What we agreed on yesterday was to add the Safety Act personnel, to add the non-Safety Act personnel, a tentative 3% wage increase for non-union people, the 900,000 non-union equity adjustment be included. And those sales tax or a sales tax increase, that's what we have to decide on if we want to include it with the sales tax or without, whether we're going to vote on that. But actually, the only thing that's different about this than yesterday is the union wage increase included. The other things we agreed
Well,
upon yesterday.
And there won't be any,
And why don't we,
and there is no sales tax potential.
I know,
so that
that's,
shouldn't
you know,
even be a bill.
that's not even in our windows.
Yeah.
And then let's take the 10 to 3% wage increase for expiring union contract. Let's take that out.
I agree.
All right, we have a consensus on that.
Yeah.
It's something we're going to change the budget for next year anyway.
Right.
So, and we do every year. Ms. Bates,
Question. So we do it seems like common sense to put that in if we know it's coming.
well, I don't know what common sense means to you, but if you want to look at what our total expenditure is going to be, our best guess for next year would include a 3% or some percentage of a non-union increase for a contract. If we want to look at the budget in reality of what it might be, okay? But if we don't have that, then we know in our minds, though, we're going to change the budget and add that to it at some point in time. But it does increase the budget and it does increase our deficit then if we do that.
Oh, I think we should do it now.
Well,
You don't.
Sorry,
I think
Mavis, I didn't
Mr.
hear you.
Leonard
What
made
did-
the point, but you don't.
We
you
can't
don't-
hear you, Mavis. You have to use. the mic.
I think we should leave it in.
What in?
Mr.
The union.
Mr. Leonard made the point. You don't begin a negotiation with a baseline that's where you think you're going to be. I mean, it's just, it's, the routine is you don't put it in and leave it out and let's not hobble our negotiators in any way.
Mr.
Chairman Surges,
Just a moment. We're talking a budget, it's our best guess what our expenses are gonna be. We don't know for a fact those are gonna be there. So it could be greater than that or less than that. And that's similar to what we're talking about here. So we don't put the 3% in?
Big deal.
That's okay. I feel like you heard me. Thank you for
Okay.
acknowledging
Mr.
my
Sturgis.
opinion. Even if
I
you
just
don't
wanted to
agree.
comment that I was the one pushing and asking for just a figure that we could have in our minds of what that's going to be for that union contract increase. And Joe, I do appreciate you taking a best guess estimate. I don't have any problem for negotiation purposes not having that in there. But I want to make sure that I take ownership of asking for that and also express my appreciation for the number being there.
Unless you can
Very
bring,
good.
stand there and hold that for me.
Sanchez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Similarly, in my recollection, we don't ever approve the non-union wage increases until after we've arrived at the union wage increases, and then we tend to match that. So I would suggest that we don't include that either in these budgets.
Consensus is we don't include it.
The union
Okay.
wage increase, yes.
I think the only negative one was Bates, and I think she's. not
Okay.
on- she's not
No,
on.
Jared's comment was for the non-union, not for union.
Well, it's for both, but essentially
We're taking
the,
both
the
those out?
non-union tends to follow the union increases.
All right. So that, Joe,
Davis with a quick comment.
yes, who is it?
I think Mr. Martin already alluded to it, that you tell your labor management negotiators that you're gonna tie their hands a little bit. If you name 3, they're not gonna ask for less. So you do not put it in now. Yes, asking for it as Cliff said, so that we could have an idea of what to anticipate. Sure, it's good to know, but you don't put it in now.
Well, you and I both know that there's more than labor negotiations and somebody's saying it should be 3% and somebody's saying it should be 2%. So I think that's immaterial, but I think we've taken it out. Your motion or your suggestion.
Well, I guess what I would like to know then, since these new sales tax included has got nothing to do with it, that's stricken. We're now taking out the 3% union contract increase. Everything else we agreed to yesterday. Is that correct, Joe?
Well,
Additional Safety Act people, the additional non-safety act people, the 3% non-union wage increase, the 900,000 for the non-union equity adjustment we agreed upon. So I don't really see where there's anything that we, outside of the union figure that we can delete. I think we've given direction on everything but that. Now today we're giving you direction on the union.
Just say, I need the direction from this committee, and so there's no, already we put in the 3%, or we're working on putting the 3% into non-union, but now Mr. Sanchez is suggesting we take it out. So a decision needs to be made there. Also, I mean, that's part of the issue. I mean, every meeting, things are questioned, and then, yes, there seems to be decisions made, but is that going to be the opinion of the whole board? Is that going to be the opinion of the executive committee? And so I cannot move forward with the budget until it stops moving and there stops being questions.
All right. Now, your suggestion of what was presented by Joe, there were option 1 and option 2. Are you saying that we move both of those along to the executive committee? Or we select one of those options?
I think, are you talking about the property tax vote?
Yes.
Yes, I think we should offer both for the executive committee to vote on and to move forward. And I'm saying, I think we've agreed on everything. Now, Mr. Sanchez did bring up the non-union wage increase of 3%. And I think we need to have a consensus on that, whether or not we want to include that or not.
Well, if we have asked for a consensus on it as presented, minus the union.
Yeah.
I think then we've
We've-
to, that.
That's good.
Okay, let's.
So are we taking off the non-union as well?
No,
Taking the union off.
Okay.
Madam Chair.
I'm referencing back to the statute, the resolution that we eventually will pass. It is the duty of the Finance Committee to pass a budget, not options. So if the Finance Committee has got to fully decide per recommendation of the Executive Committee, their best budget. So it can't be, as I just heard, what option with property tax or without. This committee has got to make that decision of do you want property tax or not? And that,
We want to vote on the property tax, not whether we want it.
oh,
or
no,
not.
no, no. I don't mean to mince words, but what budget would you like to pass? The recommendation of this committee, would you like to have property tax keep the same at 4.0? Or would you like to have it increased to 4.2? So that's it. So just, I think you're required by statute to make that recommendation to the next committee that's going to be meeting directly after this. And then they will make that final recommendation, the executive committee, to Joe for preparation of that budget. So it can change with exec, but after that executive discussion, it's done until he can put together the final budget, dash paper, and brings back to the executive committee for approval and presentation to the board for their approval.
Mr. Leonard.
Yes, well, I understand Madam Chair's points. And if we can only present one budget with the option of increasing the property tax, I want the board, the whole board, to have the right to vote on that. I don't want the executive committee or this finance committee to say no to that. I want the whole board to be able to vote on that and say, we want a property tax increase or not. So if it means we have to move forward a budget, including a property tax increase for consideration and vote separately by the whole board, I'm totally in agreement with that.
And then we would have the decision at point in the future.
We're just moving it forward. We're not voting on, we're just moving it forward for their review and to move forward to the county board to let the county board decide.
I think our state's attorney are deliberating right now.
Well, we can always modify what we
We
present.
can always amend it, yes.
Can always be changed. So, I mean, why not present it that way?
And I know that I talked to Mr. Onsick about this, and please correct me, Mr. Onsick. The other issues minus the property tax increase are the most complicated. The property tax increase, correct, is a little easier to enter into the budget because he'd have to prepare, perhaps, I'm thinking, 2 separate budgets to us.
Well, that is the issue. I can only prepare one.
That's right, he in the
And
system.
so that's all that can be in the system. So it either has to be with the property tax or without. And then at some point you can decide we can add the property tax in if it doesn't, amend it.
Yeah.
An amendment would have to be made. Or if you want to include the property tax, then you'd amend it to take it out.
That's
So,
what we're
but
saying.
it
Yes.
has to be one version or another.
We'll approve the version with property tax and present that to the executive committee. The executive committee do the same thing, present it to the full board. The full board can then decide you want to accept that as is, or we want to amend it to something different.
So I think maybe a clarification has to happen. Right now, you're giving Mr. Onsick direction.
We are.
Then the finance committee has to look at this budget and actually has to move it to the executive committee. So you're going to need another finance committee meeting.
So we're going to have another finance committee before.
Yes, because finance has to approve and move the budget. We
Okay,
can't do that
that's
today
fine.
because we don't have a budget to approve.
Okay, at that point in time, we can look at it again and make a decision, but I think we're stalling things by not moving along, getting it moving,
I agree.
Let's move it along, and I think we all feel the full board should make a decision on the budget. So let's present it.
We put it in
Full
there.
board can make the decision.
Mr. Chairman, Allen,
Okay,
Allen's.
Alan? Oh,
Oh.
yes, Ms. Allen.
thanks so much. Respectfully, since I'm not on the committee, I didn't realize that we had already made a decision about the 4%, at 3% or 4% to our non-union people. I don't remember anybody ever saying, no, 4% is too much. I had said I would rather see 4% than 3%. And if it was necessary to remove 3 new positions in order to keep the budget in about the same place, that I would rather do it that way. Did that just get, did you guys already talk about that and I just missed it? In which case I apologize.
Yes, we did. I think we had the option of 3 or 4. And I don't think 4 was really brought up to be a decision on. Clarify this in my
Oh,
mind, Mr.
okay.
Honzek. If we approve,
for the
if we say it
clarification.
should be 3%, that means we've set aside 3%. If we actually then, when we give the raises, if we decide to give 4%, we can do that, amending the budget. So it doesn't really make any difference. We're just setting aside a fund of 3% of our, or of raises. And if we decide to do something different, we can't.
And this is a draft budget.
Right.
Right.
I don't,
Thanks for the clarification.
I don't know what I'm missing here. If we ought to give a clear instruction to Joe so he doesn't walk into the next meeting saying, I need help. If the way to get the whole board to vote on the question of the property tax increase is to put it in and give them a chance to vote on it, then let's put it in and let all the board members vote on it.
That's what we
And
have.
if they vote it down, then there'll be amendments saying it should be at 0 or 3% or 2%.
And if they approve it, so be it too.
And if they approve it,
Leonard's-
it's
That was
approved.
his proposal.
Yeah, so we gotta have this done here. This is, we're spinning in a circle like a
I know.
top.
Sanchez here. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can we just go through these one at a time and just get a general consensus and then move this forward?
Already done.
Oh, we did that.
did.
I mean,
Union wages. Everything else has been approved yesterday.
okay, well, because yeah, I mean, let's just move on.
Move it along.
All right, I'm asking for a consensus at this point in time.
Yes.
Do we have any negatives?
Yes.
Pardon?
Surges nay.
All right, good enough. Then the consensus of this committee is to recommend the budget that was proposed and modified by Mr. Leonard, which includes the tax,
Those right.
property tax increase. Okay. Is that agreed?
Yeah.
So that's our consensus from this committee. All right.
Mr. Chairman Surges,
Yes, sir, just
I'd like to do this as a roll call vote rather than an
can't.
all in favor.
It's a consensus.
The
You can't do
consensus.
it. Can't.
Correct, and I'm asking for it not to be.
You can't.
You can't change it.
There's no resolution
The
to make a
procedure.
motion on, so we can't vote.
Got it. Thank you.
Well, we're saying it's not a formal vote. It's a
It's a
consensus.
consensus. That's all.
It's not a formal vote.
Everybody could state their individual consensus and it's not a roll call.
All right, moving on. Old business. I have none. Reports placed on file.
Request for reports based on file unanimous consent.
Agreed.
Agreed consensus? Thank you. Executive session? Oh, my
Be a
God.
good idea.
Pardon?
That'd be a good idea.
Oh, yeah.
No.
We need a motion for adjournment.
Moves for adjournment.
Sanchez seconds.
Leonard and Sanchez seconds. All those in favor say aye.